Everybody get up, no need to cram now. We got a real jam going down, going down, going down, going down, going down, going down. Welcome to the IntelliJAMS.
My favorite type of jam. We've got one of our partners joining us. We've got Anthony Morgan from Enavi, co-founder and CEO. And Anthony, I'm excited to jam today because one of the things I admire about your approach the most is what you call the 3 I's. And I think it's like so aligned with how we think here at IntelliJAMS about experimentation, about testing. So for those listening, I promise Anthony and I are going to jam on a specific test that we're going to dissect. But Anthony, I wanted to tee it up and let you talk about this because I think it'll help frame the rest of the conversation. So do you want to give the listeners the 3 I's? What is it? Why is it important?
Yeah. So I think the first thing I'll start off with is the 3 I's is meant to move away from this idea that CRO is A/B testing, and that if you're A/B testing, you're doing CRO, and that testing is just a means to validate that you're making an impact. We see testing as a method of research. Yes, it can tell you the impact that you're having, but there's so much that you can extract from a winning, a losing, and sometimes even a flat test. And so that is really the kind of core thesis of it, is this idea that it's a loop. Like once a test ends, you don't just interpret the results and then move on. You take away learnings from that, you extract as much as you can about the user and the customer, and then feed that back into the loop. And the loop ultimately starts with insights. And so any of your could A/B test ideas are going to be rooted in solving a problem. And in order to solve a problem, you need to understand what problems exist. And so that's where insights come in. There's a variety of different research methods that you can use to identify the customer problems that are holding back specific metrics on your store. And then from there, you're going to gather insights from that research. And then the next step is to take those insights, turn them into hypotheses, and then implement them into tests. And that's the second I. And the last I is after those tests are completed, you're interpreting the results. Not just did this test win, did it lose, but what did we learn about our customer? What did we learn about the problem? Did we solve the problem? Did we make steps towards solving the problem? And then how can we take that and turn that back into insights? Instead of it just being this line where it ends at, okay, the test is done. Let's move on. We just did a sticky add to cart. Let's move on to changing the color of the add to cart button. We actually turn it around and we extract as much insights out of that hypothesis and that test. Because many cases, there's iterations that you can make that you can continue just to extract learnings and wins from solving a particular problem that your customers have.
Dude, I love that. I mean, you and I have jammed on this stuff before, so it doesn't surprise me that we're philosophically aligned on this one. But just because you're A/B testing doesn't mean you're doing CRO. And like, hey, if you treat it not as a loop, you're just going to search for wins, and all that's going to happen is win, check, lose, bad, and just like try to keep on like stacking these small things. So I really love this approach. Like something we say all the time is you're just asking questions, and sometimes you don't get the answer that you were looking for, and you just opened up 5 new questions. Those are 5 new things to put into the insights to then go implement something on. So very, very much aligned with this. So let's take this 3 I's framework. Let's take it for a spin. So you have a test that you want to talk through today. Do you maybe want to tee up? What can you tell us about this kind of like going in, maybe high level, and then we'll take it through the I's. We'll go through insight, implement, interpret, but maybe give the listeners kind of the cliff notes of the test we're talking about.
Yep. Yeah. So we'll take a step back and talk about the brand first. So the brand sells what I would consider it's a fitness accessory or tool. Ultimately, helps you stretch. And it's relatively expensive. Like this would be kind of in the luxury tier of, fitness tools, or fitness gear. And so that's kind of a good starting point to understand what we're kind of working with from that end. And then when we look at the actual data, business problems, They drive a substantial amount of traffic from paid social. They also have been getting more and more traction on the affiliate and like influencer front. And so that traffic is dropping on their homepage. And that was creating an opportunity. Ultimately, there was users getting on the homepage that weren't advancing to view a product at the rate that we would like to see. Within our like inter-site funnel method, this is a common issue that brands have. Like our data says 94% plus of brands have some type of product discovery issue. And there was many things that we did to solve this. But one of the first things we did was we needed to understand, okay, we know where an issue is. Users are landing on the homepage, but they're not advancing to product pages at the rate that we would like. So we dug into some qualitative research. We did post-purchase surveys, review mining. We found some of the top motivators. And we found that a lot of them weren't really about stretching. It wasn't people were like, oh yeah, this product helps me stretch better. It was that this product actually reduces my pain. It's the outcomes, right? There's better mobility as a result of this, better quality of life. And then we also discovered that there's a lot of anxiety around, how do I even use this? And there's multiple data points kind of pointing to those. And so that is one of the key, a couple of the key things that we extracted from some of the voice of customer research that we did. And so we had those insights. And when we kind of pair that with the current experience and with the homepage, the above the fold or near the fold and above is really important real estate. And their old kind of hero setup was a video plus a call to action. And it just wasn't quite speaking directly to those outcomes, those motivators that we were seeing in the research. And so what we did is we replaced it with a more kind of structured hero that spoke directly to those motivators that we found in the research, the pain, the mobility, the quality of life. We added a subheadline explaining the benefits and then a call to action. And then there was some GIFs showing the people actually using it to address that friction around how do we even use this thing. Because the video, though it wasn't a bad video, it just didn't get as much interaction. The GIFs were like pretty punchy, straightforward to show these relatively bouncy users. Like they're on their mobile device. They saw this on social media. They're pretty likely to bounce if they are like, what the heck is this? I don't get it. Or once they see the price, And so those were some of the things that we kind of did in the implementation stage. This was the test that we ran. We ran it versus their old hero and targeted users that were visiting the homepage. And it was a clear win. When we finished the test and kind of interpreted the results, we saw that those emotional drivers around kind of the outcomes that they were seeking, not focusing in on like the functional angle of the product, but actually the outcomes had a massive impact. And I can go into some of the results from it. These were extremely high results. This would be rare territory, where like, to be clear, we see results like this and we would question the validity of a test. And this is not normal, but there was a 36% increase in conversion rate. And, that was 97% confidence. There was a 30% increase in ARPU. And so multiple metrics saw substantial increase in performance. And it was pretty clear that, kind of speaking towards these outcomes that users were commonly calling out in the voice of customer research was a big win. And so from this learning, we can take it back. We can pull out a piece of like real customer knowledge. Like at this point, we've validated that this is impactful. Now we can turn this into an insight that says, hey, where are the opportunities for us to look at using this in other landing pages, in ads, in the PDP, in email? Like, where are the ways that we can extract this learning and make sure that we're not primarily focusing on the functional angle, but we're focusing in on those emotional drivers, the outcomes that the user is seeking, and being really clear about the ones that we're focusing in on. Because we could probably focus in on a dozen, but what are the ones that actually matter? You shouldn't list them all out. Let's focus on the ones that they're most commonly kind of that we see in reviews and surveys. And so that was a key thing. We didn't focus on a dozen of them, right? We just focused on a few that we saw most commonly talked about.
Yeah, I really like this, and like the 36% increase in conversion is like bananas. And like I think anyone looking at that would be like, let's go dig in. Let's make sure something's not up here. Did we actually run this long enough? But at that level of confidence, like I think you definitely have something here, right? And it's funny when you were saying like, hey, these users are bouncy. My immediate thought was like, oh, like they're stretching, like they're bouncy, like they're like bouncy people. And then you start there to justify it with like, oh no, they're bouncing at a high rate. I'm like, oh, okay, they're bouncy and bouncy. With this, so when we think about this as a loop and we think about like, hey, we asked a question, we got some answers, potentially it goes into more questions. Like when you were pulling out some of these outcomes, some of these emotional drivers, is there like any appetite from this brand to try to like even zero in on that further and be like, hey, one of these is actually the driver of most of this? Can we get more specific in our ad creative? Is there a need to go into specific landing pages, specific PDPs to some of these angles?
Yeah, no, 100%. I think this is how you get the buy-in into that, right? So commonly when we work with a brand, there is a level of assumption about who they think their customer is and how they should message to them, right? And so they kind of have this baseline for not only what they're doing, but what they think they should be doing and who their customer is. And so this is an opportunity for us to get buy-in to, hey, here's what we've seen in the research. Here's how it actually translated to results. Not just theoretical, we pulled this out, this was common themes, but this is actually proven by data. Because you can pull something out of research and it can be an interesting insight, but it doesn't really mean that it's a learning, right? It's not something that you can fully submit as we learn this about our customer. And so when it was validated by the results in the test, it's a learning. And from that learning, we can then double down in not only how do we take this across other areas, but how do we go even deeper into it? Like you said, like there's opportunities to narrow in on what are those most important outcomes. Of these ones that we did, which one was the one that actually moved the needle? Can we double down on it even further?
Something you said there, hey, there's a difference between a learning and an insight. Like the insight phase of this cycle that we're talking about, like, hey, we could have stopped that. We looked through the research, we looked through the reviews. We found some of these like commonalities. We're not talking about these things right now. You could just jump and be like, go use this everywhere. But like, I think when we're talking about asking questions, it's not just asking questions. It's like ask questions, validate decisions. So it's like, hey, we got this. We asked a good question. We found some learnings inside of here. Let's go try some shit and validate it. Like, okay, we've done this. There's something here. We've changed the video. We've changed some of these things. Like where do we go from here? And that's why I love not thinking about, I forget how you framed it at the beginning. I'm going to have to go back and clip it, but like, it's not just about chasing a win. Like, imagine if you just did this and said like, well, job well done. We're getting 36 more conversion on the homepage. Call it a day. No, like this can go into the emails. This can go into the ads. This can inform so much more to go back into that loop. And like you were saying, I think a lot of people come in with assumptions, and not that they're bad assumptions. I think a lot of times the assumptions on like who the customer is and who's buying is like, hey, if you've been in business for 5 years, it's just constantly evolving. As you go and get more of the market, as you find new channels, like the mix of people you're talking to starts to change. So it's not even that like, oh, that was a bad assumption at the beginning. It's just like things change, market changes, conditions change. Always got to be learning.
Yep. No, totally. That's where I like the image of product market fit being like you're on a treadmill. And if you stop thinking about product market fit, you will fall off that treadmill. Like it's something that you don't reach product market fit. It's something that you're actively and constantly working towards, especially as you get further and further away from your initial or core customer. There's going to be there may be some of those outcomes that speak more specifically to one of their personas, that could be expanded on in a million different ways, just from, okay, let's really narrow in on this idea of, the lack of mobility that they're experiencing. And there's probably a whole landing page that could be built out on that that's extremely educational towards that outcome and the commonalities of their customers with that. And so I think that is so key. It's so key.
The treadmill analogy is a good one, and custom moving further and further away from that core audience, like that's growth. Like if you're going to grow I was going to say a D2C brand, I'm just going to extend it generally. Like if you're going to grow a brand, you have to move like further and further away from like who that core audience is to get that growth. And it's like, where can we find those commonalities? How can we make this like relatable to the core and like change something up? And so I guess like last question before we probably wrap up is like, do you have any thoughts on how brands should be thinking about kind of personalizations? So like, hey, we have this kind of like overall change to the site. You talked about some of those PDPs, like any tips, tricks, best practices for those being like, I'm going to start extending into some of these other areas. How should I be thinking about like the experiences I create as I extend outward?
Yep. No, that's a good question. I think the one thing I will start with is, for many brands, personalization doesn't make sense. Like you don't have the sample size in those segments to make personalizing worth it. But the most common way for the vast majority of D2C brands is through paid social. You're driving lots of traffic from there, and it is a massive portion of your ability to grow well. And so you can segment within that. What are the different personas that you're targeting? What are the ways that you can ultimately speak to them through the landing page, through the funnel, create that cohesiveness between the pre-click and the post-click? To me, that's the most important area for personalization, that until you do that well, I wouldn't waste your time with, okay, we're going to set up some personalization for email. Like, sure, if you're doing a promotion, like let's not drive them to a homepage. Let's create a promotional landing page. But like the other, getting more deeper and more granular, just for most like 8-figure brands, doesn't quite make sense until you're getting to like, 100 million in revenue and you've got 1 million sessions a month. Then you start getting into some bigger segments and there's some bigger opportunity to personalize. But I always say, like, start with the biggest problem. And usually the biggest problem is paid social and really cracking new customer acquisition. And there's so much opportunity there with the direction that Meta is heading, with how they handle creative and targeting.
Yep.
For you to make sure that there's consistency and cohesiveness between the pre and the post click.
Yeah. Two things you said there. I think like the personalization on like content matching, like you were saying, like, hey, something's happening in the ad and like, what am I going to do when they get to the site? Obviously requires a certain amount of traffic being split between these, like, let's call them personas. I think the other thing you hit on there, which is also important, is the offer matching. Like if you're going to make an offer in an ad, if you're going to have an offer in the email, like make sure that there actually is like that offer cohesion happening. Like that's kind of like needs to happen, but
it's table stakes.
But surprisingly gets like forgotten about, especially on the ad side, where it's like, hey, let's try putting the offer in the ad creative itself. And it's like, oh, well, like that goes to a specific landing page, but now I have this kind of like splitting across the site and someone ends up on the homepage on this offer and they're like, where do I actually go get the thing? Yeah. So it can happen, but like, I totally agree on the ad front, and the being able to put like different personas, different outcomes, not even personas, just like, hey, which of these outcomes do I want to target? Which of these problem statements do I want to target? And then seeing where you're getting traction at the ad level. Because again, you're going to have a lot more data points at the ad level than you are once someone comes to the site. And then just like seeing if you can get that cohesion, that consistency between the two of those, I think is a great place to start. So
yeah, well, I think one of the biggest cheat codes there, which nobody really talks about it, I don't know why, is you can use Meta's audience type, and you can pipe into your UTM new users and existing customers. And for the vast majority of brands, if you look at your performance coming from Meta and you have these segmented out, you'll see that these existing customers are converting at like 4 or 5 times
Yeah.
the new. And for some brands, they have a substantial amount of existing coming through. Like I talked to a brand the other day and it was like, we're only able to get like 30% new visitors on our Meta campaigns right now. And so it's mostly existing. And if they were pulling out those existing customers and just hyper focusing in on new users with their testing, they would actually learn so much more, because you don't have a high intent user kind of muddying the data.
Super important. I was actually talking to a brand a few weeks ago where he's like, I'm basically, for a bit, I'm turning off any sort of like retargeting. Like I don't want to touch people that have shopped with me before. Like I just want to scope this to net new, and I want to look at what my NCAC is looking like for these new customers. And like, can I do something that is specific to, I need to convince someone to try this for the first time, is a very, but I shouldn't say always, but has the potential to be a very different consideration style than someone coming back for a second, third, fourth purchase. So like, again, muddying the waters. Like if my goal is I want Anthony to see this for the first time and be compelled to try it, is a very different experience than Anthony's been here before, I want him to do it again.
Right. Exactly. No, very different. Very different. I think there's so much power in being able to segment that out and understanding performance and how your tests are performing instead of just looking at them blended together.
Maybe that's a good spot to kind of like wrap this, is as you're looking at, again, in Anthony's eyes framework, like when we get to that interpreting, I think another thing I see happen a little too frequently is, did this win, yes or no? And having it be like super binary, where a lot of times, like when you dig into some of the segments you were talking about, like, hey, we ran this, look at new versus returning, look at channel source, look at what products were being like, find ways to go and like dissect what you found. Not necessarily because you're going to find something that was statistically validated and you can be like, oh, that's actually just the winner out of here. But to that point of like, this question opened up a new question. Like maybe there's something inside of a sliver of this test that actually is the next big thing to go question, the next big thing to build a test around. So, yeah, I think like make sure that biggest takeaways for me here, it's cyclical. Don't like, it's not binary yes or no winners. It's like you have to build hypotheses. You have to build theses, right? And go like build the experiments to go figure that out. Not just have a list of things to go bang out and say, this was the higher converter, on to the next thing.
Yep. Yeah. Here's the list of tests our CEO wants to run. Let's crank through them.
That happens very, very, very frequently. I know you're joking.
I know.
But only half joking. Anthony, before I let you go, where can the people follow along with you? Twitter, LinkedIn, newsletter? Where should people get more info?
Yeah, the 2 best spots are going to be on LinkedIn. Usually consistent on there in terms of posting, and I like to talk about the process. Anytime you hear me posting or see any of my posts, it's going to be very much similar to this. What was the process for how we got to those results? Because that's what matters. I don't believe in best practices, and the process is what's going to learn to you winning and actually make an impact for your business. And then we do have a newsletter that goes out weekly, and you can find that through my LinkedIn too.
Amazing. There are no silver bullets.
Nope.